session. Parties and counsel are present. All members of our jury and our alternates are present. Our witness is back on the witness stand, and you may resume your examination.
Thank you. What you just described then, I believe when we left off, was the level at which you can confidently say it's not machine noise or any other artifact from the procedure. Is that what we call the analytical threshold?
Yes, sir. The analytical threshold is the level at which we can feel confident that the signal that is received is not machine noise.
And that varies with each lab according to their validation studies.
And perhaps with the instrument that they use also.
What do you mean by that?
There are different instruments that can do this same capillary electrophoresis. And the different detection systems may have different sensitivities, may have different electronic noise. It may be very similar. There are also different cameras that are used that have different sensitivities. In fact, I believe that when they went to the next generation, the 3500, the camera was much more sensitive, and therefore the appearance of the electropherogram was different, and it was required again to establish analytical thresholds.
Now, what we've been looking at here is the known sample for the defendant, Exhibit 859. Would you say it's a pretty clean electropherogram or EPG?
Very.
Using a technical term, but
Yes, sir, you are.
does that make sense? I am, okay.
Yes. It is a very clean-looking electropherogram, yes, sir.
Okay. And you indicated that at each location, for the most part, we only see 2 peaks, which would represent alleles at each location. How would a mixture vary in appearance?
A mixture could vary in a couple of ways. One is looking at the results that you get at a particular DNA location. The heights of the peaks may be vastly different. We have an expectation that alleles or peaks that come from one individual should roughly have a particular ratio between the peak heights. If these peak heights are vastly different, that may indicate actually the presence of more than one individual. Third or fourth peak here, then definitely you have more than one contributor. You may have 2 or 3 other contributors. Pretty much what you do is you take the number of alleles that you see divided by 2, and that's the minimum number of contributors that you would have at that particular DNA location.
Okay.
Which would mean then for the entire DNA sample.
I have an example, and I'm sure we'll return to it. Exhibit 866, if I could have the overhead. Okay, I'm going to show you the top part of the first page. And ask if that describes what you meant when you said a mixture, or what you were describing a mixture. Or what a mixture would look like.
Yes, sir, it is. At this particular DNA location, which I believe is that first one we looked at, the D8 DNA location, you have 4 recognized peaks, 2 of which are much higher than the other 2. This is a result that is consistent with a 2-person mixture, one person being a 13-14, the other person being an 8-11. In order to properly interpret this particular DNA location, though, we should take a look at all of the DNA locations to determine how many potential contributors you would have to this mixture.
Okay. We'll return to that, to this particular exhibit in a second. Not a second. How does degradation, or does DNA degrade?
Yes, sir, it does. due to a number of factors, DNA does degrade.
And when I say degrade, what does that mean to you? Can you describe that for us?
To me, it means that there is some sort of process by which the DNA is broken down, either into smaller fragments, and it may be broken down to a point at which it is no longer typable, or can no longer be amplified through the polymerase chain reaction. In general, those alleles that are on segments of DNA that are longer alleles will degrade faster than those that are shorter alleles. They have a higher chance of survival, if you will, through a degradation process. Also, in general, as you go across one of these electropherograms from left to right, the alleles are getting bigger. So if you were to take a look at a sample, excuse me, it may be possible to get results for the DNA locations that are indicated on the left-hand side of your electropherogram, but as you look at it, they drastically taper off or get smaller or disappear as you go to the right-hand side. This is also an indication of potential degradation.
Ski slope, almost looks like a ski slope from left to right.
That is a term that is used. Yes, sir.
Can I have my computer back? So are these results then compiled for, I guess, for review into a chart?
Yes, sir. Each sample that I look at and that I eventually amplify and obtain a typable result will give me an electropherogram from which I will gather the results and place on a chart.
Okay. And I'm showing you Exhibit 864. Is that a chart that was prepared in this case?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you, prior to conducting your analysis, obtain profiles that were generated by the Department of Justice, California Department of Justice Laboratory?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. And are those represented here on this exhibit?
Yes, they are. They are represented by the last 4 columns on the right-hand side. It would be the columns that are indicated for Joseph McStay Sr., Summer McStay, McStay child number 1, which is a femur sample, and McStay child number 2, which was a skull piece.
Now I note on the children some of the, and then so on the left where it says description, those are the locations that you talked about previously, right?
Correct. Those are the DNA locations that you would find on the electropherograms in those banners across the top of the graphs.
Okay. Now there are some missing, in particular with regard to McStay child number 1. Is that common on when you get DNA from a bone, or attempt to get DNA from a bone?
I have not examined a lot of bones, but it is not uncommon for you to get a result that you either cannot interpret or don't have confidence in, or you don't get a result. And that would indicate basically you would have no result then listed in your chart. I do not know what the cause for these particular ones is, since I did not run this particular test.
Sure. And then the other reference buccal swabs, Tracy Russell, Blanchard, and Charles Merritt, those were performed by you?
Yes, sir.
And then so to the left of the location, for instance, D8S1179, Charles Merritt is an 8 and 11 at that location.
Yes, sir, as we saw on the previous exhibit.
Now, you received a lot of other items in this case, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you receive items that were described to you as coming from the grave sites?
Yes, sir.
Summer McStay, Joseph McStay, and the 2 children.
Yes, sir. I believe they were gravesite, labeled gravesite A and gravesite B.
And did you also receive items that were identified to you as coming from Fallbrook house in 2014.
Yes, sir. Those were much later. When I analyzed this particular case, there were actually 3 sets of examinations that I did.
When was the first one?
The first one was in February, January, February of 2014.
Okay.
And then immediately after that, in about March, February, March, there was a second set. And then in September, October, there was a third set.
And so much later, the 2014 from the Fallbrook home would have come later.
Much later, yes, sir. Each one of these sets had its, not only the samples that they analyzed, but they also submitted additional reference samples for me to compare, not just with the ones I was analyzing for that set, but also with any sort of previous results that I had obtained.
Okay. And in regard to the Fallbrook house from 2014, did you receive samples from what was identified to you as the current owners of the house, the Callahans?
Yes, sir.
Did you receive at least one item from what was identified to you as Mr. Merritt's Chevrolet truck?
Yes, sir.
And did you also receive items that were identified to you as coming from the Isuzu Trooper that belonged to the McStay family?
Yes, sir. That would have been in the first set.
I've created a chart. Mr. Himes has agreed to let me use his penmanship because mine's horrible. If we can just go through the items that you received, and then for convenience so the jury can follow along, we'll discuss what your findings were, if any, with each item.
Yes, sir. It would be helpful for me to be able to use my notes to kind of refresh my memory and make sure I get everything.
Sure.
Thank you.
Did you receive an item that was labeled A1 and coming from grade B, identified as sweatpants?
Yes, sir. That would be in the second set of samples I looked at.
Can we have the overhead? Did you take those out and look at them?
Yes, I did. They were in a sealed bag with 2 other items identified as coming from grade B. I took them out of the bag along with the other 2 items, and I took a look at them, but that's about all I did. I just kind of gave a general description in my notes, and did nothing further.
Okay, so if we put under item A1, not examined, would that be accurate? Not analyzed? What would be the accurate term for those sweatpants?
They were not examined. In my notes, I put NE. I should kind of predicate this whole thing in that the object of doing these examinations was part of a request from the investigative team. And they were interested in looking for what they called touch DNA. DNA that didn't necessarily come from the victim, but came from someone else who may have touched articles that were recovered from the grave sites. In response to their requests, I took a look at these items and tried to evaluate if I thought that recovery of this trace or touch DNA was possible. In my opinion, it is not possible in things that are buried for 4 years. And I expressed that to the team. We had kind of a general meeting. In fact, I believe we had 2 of them where I sat down with the investigative team along with a couple of other representatives from our forensic biology unit, and they were adamant about looking at samples for this trace DNA. I therefore decided that I would concentrate on those areas that had the highest probability, which was still extremely low, of recovering any DNA. And these sweatpants did not qualify for that. Basically, they were caked in dirt. In my opinion, there was no way that you would not only recover no DNA from anybody touching the garments, but you probably, in fact, you would not obtain any DNA from the person who was wearing the garments who had decomposed with them.
Why?
The DNA is gone. We talked about degradation. When you die, there are biological processes that take place that they're intended to recycle the elements that you have tied up in these major proteins, fats, nucleic acids, sugars, and there are biological processes within you and also in microbes and bacteria that chew these macromolecules up. That's what they're designed to do. That's their biological function. And the fact that when you took a look at these graves, there was no tissue. The only tissue that was found was bone. But there was no skin, no muscle. All of that was gone. All of that was degraded. In essence, biologically chewed up into their individual components. You are not going to find any DNA that represents what had been buried 3 or 4 years prior.
Objective speculation.
Overruled.
When I explained this to the investigators, they were still insistent about trying to look for this trace or touch DNA. Therefore, I decided to concentrate on those areas that might have been protected from some of these biological processes, although I truly believe there weren't any areas that would be protected. So as a result, when I took a look at this set of sweatpants that are caked in dirt, it's not suitable for touch or trace DNA analysis. And I did not examine them any farther.
Now, when you say touch or trace, we're talking about, I come over here and I touch the lectern.
Whether you had DNA on your hands, and there are certain things, and each one of us as individuals have different biological processes, things, habits that may increase or decrease the amount of DNA that we have on the surface of our skin or on our hands. If you sneeze on your hands and touch something, you have a higher likelihood than if you have just washed your hands and then dried it on a towel and touched it. When I say higher likelihood, it doesn't make it an absolute. So it's possible.
So you were asked by the investigators to look for touch DNA, that is, DNA that someone had touched and that had been in the ground for 3.5 years, more or less.
That's correct.
And in your opinion, and still your opinion today, any DNA you got from that would not be representative of what went into the ground.
My opinion was it was a futile effort. And it was just that. And because of their insistence, I have to admit, it's kind of easier to, should I use the term roll over, and just go through and do it. And then in the end, see what results I got. In the end, the results I got, don't want to spoil the rest of your thing. The results I got was that basically there was no DNA. There was no DNA, even in areas that might have been protected. There were a couple of samples that had knots in them. I thought, well, maybe if I undo the knots, in fact, those are the major areas I concentrated on, maybe those were protected from some sort of degradation process. So I marked areas of straps or of wires, loosened the knots, and swab the inside areas of those to see if I could get any DNA. No.
But we'll get to that. You talked about touch DNA, though, that is somebody touching something. Did you examine it for any other biological fluids? And if not, why not?
Are we talking simply about the sweatpants, or are we talking about the items in general that I looked at?
Well, let's talk about the sweatpants.
No, sir. The only thing I did with the sweatpants was I took a look at them and said, basically in my mind, no chance, and moved on.
How about the panties or the underwear? Item A2 was identified as coming from grave team.
Pretty much the same thing.
Did you take photographs of those?
I took photographs of the panties. They were easier to do, to give an idea of a state and the condition that they were in.
If I can have the turn two, please. Showing you what's the, that's exhibit 862, page 6. The top part of page 6. Do you recognize that?
I recognize that as a picture that I have in my notes of the panties that we spoke of, that I'm 8-2.
Okay. And going down, so you designated this item A2 label.
Yes, I just took a picture of the tag that was on the panties.
And they look like they're in pretty bad shape. Fair to say?
That was my impression when I first saw them, yes, sir.
Okay. You didn't examine these for presence of semen or sperm or anything like that?
No, sir.
Why not?
The screening tests that we do for semen are based on enzymes and proteins, which would be long gone, and excuse me, any cellular debris also would be chewed up and degraded. So in terms of looking for things like sperm cells and so forth, sperm cells are hardy sperm. They're hardy cells. We use that to our advantage when we're analyzing sexual assault cases. But if you subject them to this type of environment, they're not going to survive.
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
Did you find any hairs or any fibers?
I did find some on some of the items. Let me check my notes to see if I found any on this pair of panties.
I'm looking at page 1 of 56 of your handwritten notes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, there were some hairs or fiber-like materials. I took a look at them using a stereo microscope. Again, I mentioned that hairs, the nuclear material would be in the hair root. You can take a look and see if there's a hair root structure on the bottom of the hair, and I did not see any. I didn't do any further examination of them. I just repackaged them and set them aside if somebody else wanted to take a look at them later.
So when you're looking for that, the nuclear DNA that you find would be in the root of the hair.
Yes, sir, that's correct. There are other types of DNA that the body has. I mentioned earlier about one of the other organelles that is present in the cell is the mitochondria. Mitochondria have their own DNA. It's a small circular DNA. It's much the same as bacterial DNA. However, it's not the type of DNA that we do any sort of forensic typing in our crime lab. Excuse me. But it has been known to exist in hair shafts. So therefore, it's potential to do mitochondrial DNA on those particular samples if someone so desired.
And that's potentially, you don't know. Right.
That's true.
Did you receive item A3, which was identified as half of a bra, the left cuff? Oh wait, going back to A2, is it fair to say here on the chart it was not examined? Or not
It was not analyzed.
Not analyzed.
I did not take any sample to analyze it. when I examined it is when I recovered the hair or the fibers and so on, and took a look at them and packaged them.
Okay, so now backing up to my previous question. Did you receive item A3, which is identified as a half of a bra left cup coming from grade B?
Yes, sir.
And what were your observations about that?
Probably the primary one was that there was some sort of material on the outside of the cup that appeared to be a drip-like pattern, in which something, the appearance was that something had been poured on it or had come in contact with it and dripped a little bit and then dried in that position. It was in a pattern such that if the bra were being worn whilst this took place, the person would be lying on their right side. Basically, that was the general direction or appearance.
And I'm showing you page 7 of Exhibit 862. Appears to be 3 photographs. You recognize that?
Yes, sir, I do. This is a representation of what I observed. I don't know what that substance was. I did take a small sample of it and packaged it separately in case someone else wanted to examine it sometime.
Did you do any further analysis of that left cup of the bra? Item
I don't believe I did. No, sir.
A3. Okay. Did you receive, was identified to you as item A? Okay, so what would be fair to write there under A3, half the bra left cup? Not analyzed?
There's appearance of a drip pattern on the outside of the cup. There was no analysis done.
Not analyzed? Is that fair?
That's fair.
Did you receive item A26 that was identified to you as half a bra, the right cup being found outside the graves?
Yes, sir, I did.
What did you observe about that item?
It also had areas that were caked with dirt. I took photographs of the inside and the outside of the cup. There was an area on the outside of the cup that did not appear to have as much mud or caked material on it. So I went ahead and swabbed that area to try and remove any potential DNA that was present. I believe also there was a clasp that was on that particular portion of the bra, and I swabbed the clasp also, and then extracted that for DNA.
Let me show you page 8 of Exhibit 862. It's 2 photographs, there's one on top, one on the bottom. Could you tell us what we're seeing there?
I believe that's page 6 of 56.
That's correct. They're not in order here in the exhibit. It's on
Oh, I'm sorry.
page 8.
Yes, this is the appearance of the inside and the outside of the right cup of the bra that was submitted.
And it looks like here is where the clasp would have been.
Yes, sir.
When you swabbed that area, did you attempt to obtain DNA from it?
Yes, sir.
What did you do?
I swabbed it and then extracted the swabs and then tried to determine if I could get DNA from them.
Okay. And what did you determine?
The one on McStay, so I want to make absolutely certain. I'm pretty sure I didn't get anything from that. I did not get any DNA recovered from that sample.
So no DNA on item A26,
Correct.
right cup outside of there.
Let me interrupt you before we go to the next item. It's about 12 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and take our noon recess till 1:30 this afternoon. Keep in mind the admonition previously given to you, not to form or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case, and we'll see everyone back at 1:30.